I welcome all to this side event on closing the energy efficiency gaps, knowledge gaps. And I would like to thank the United Nations and the organizers of the high-level dialogue on energy for providing us this opportunity with this platform to present our work. And I would now like to invite my boss, Susanne Pedersen, Director of UNEP DTU Partnership, to speak on the role of energy efficiency in addressing climate change and specifically skill gaps and challenges in the energy transition.
Thank you, Talat, and welcome everyone to this very interesting webinar. I'm Susanne Pedersen, the Director of the UNEP DTU Partnership, a UN Environment Collaborating Center engaged in implementing UNEP's climate and energy strategy. We also host the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency, which dedicates its activities to accelerating the uptake of energy efficiency policies and actions at a global stage. Part of its work focuses on the identification of the skill gaps and how to correct those gaps so that energy efficiency adoption could move faster and be taken at scale. When it comes to implementing energy efficiency projects in developing countries and emerging economies, the lack of practitioner skills can be a barrier. This is repeatedly identified through the engagement with governments, training professionals, and the private sector around the world. Despite these challenges, the global transition to net zero carbon economies can create large numbers of green jobs across the economy and become an engine for sustainable development. To support the energy transition of developing and emerging economies, the Copenhagen Center on Energy Efficiency encourages the development of a local comprehensive offer of training for energy efficiency related professionals, ranging from practitioners to highly qualified professionals. To achieve these outcomes, the Copenhagen Center has worked closely with local country stakeholders and has analyzed the academic curricula and the skill sets of individuals responsible for delivering energy efficiency projects. These have been compared to the required skills in 3 different sectors in 3 different countries belonging to 3 different continents. The sectors we will look into today are the building sector, the transport sector, and the industry sector, respectively in Argentina, Sri Lanka, and Kenya. As markets develop and mature, which often includes new features like digitalization, the qualification levels of workers in the energy efficiency sector also need to embrace these new methods. This fact will also provide an opportunity to professionals with lower skill levels to move towards an increasing specialization of competences and hopefully better job conditions and opportunities, while at the same time delivering on the sustainability agenda. This will be discussed in this session, moderated by Talat Munshi, the Senior Advisor here at UNEP DTU Partnership, and I look forward to the discussion. Over to you, Talat.
Okay, before we start discussing about today's event, I would like to inform all our attendees that we comply with the General Data Protection Act, also known as GDPR. This means that your personal data such as name, email, workplace, etc. is safely processed and stored, and all of your rights pursuant to the GDPR are respected. You have full access to the data being processed about you, and at any time you can request that inaccurate data be deleted or rectified. For access or further information, please contact with the persons that are presented here. A few things about Copenhagen Center. The center conducts research and advisory activities in the field of energy efficiency and services as energy efficiency hub for the Sustainable Energy for All initiative. The center has an established network of global, regional, and national partners with a broad range of stakeholders to help accelerate the implementation of energy efficiency activities. As part of the center's activity, we have conducted work on looking at energy efficiency knowledge gaps and probable solutions. And I would like to introduce uh, the work, and then which will be followed by presentations on individual studies. Following the Paris Agreement, it is important that we work towards limiting global average temperatures to below 2 degrees and now 1.5 degrees pre-industrial levels. And we need to make efforts towards that. And energy being one of the larger GHG emitter, there are ambitions, and we need to work towards limiting GHG emissions from energy, and generally for which uh, and to achieve these targets, we would want to achieve a target of doubling the improvement of global energy efficiency. So basically, in essence, we are aiming for a transformation across the value chain within energy efficiency sector, so that we are able to sustain development with minimal energy use. One strong pillar that is required to support these efforts is availability of professionals to support efforts across value chain. So the basic question is, are education systems, especially in the developing world, providing such skills and knowledge? So in this project, we try and answer two main questions. The first one is, are there enough skills among the professionals working in the to, field to implement energy efficiency projects? And second, are education programs tuned enough to provide the future skills requirement for these projects? So we do this by first understanding the ambitions and the skills that will be required to achieve these ambitions. And basically, then we do a survey of in-skilled professionals and try to understand the skill levels and the sources from which the skills were got from. And also, we do a survey of the education programs to look at the supply of the skills. This gives us the gap and understanding of the gap. Once the gap is known, we try to look at how others have tried to bridge this gap and try to look at how this understanding can help the case study countries. We have conducted studies in 3 countries, namely Argentina, Kenya, and Sri Lanka. For building sector in Argentina, transport sector in Sri Lanka, and commercial and industrial sector in Kenya. These studies were carried out in collaboration with key local stakeholders and with help of consultants. These consultants will present the individual studies, and they are our next speakers: Leila for Argentina, Thusitha for Sri Lanka, and Keren for Kenya. Finally, I would like to inform you that you can send us your questions during presentations using the dedicated icon, and we will do our best to answer as many as we can at the end. Please do not forget to mention the name of the panelist that the question is for. You can read more about our work at our webpage, and I would like to thank all of you on behalf of all my colleagues at UDP who have worked on this project, and thank you for your attention on behalf of C2E2 at UNEP DTU partnership. Thank you. And I would like to hand over to Leila for the next presentation.
Well, thank you, Talat, and good morning from Argentina. As Talat was saying, we did carry this assessment in Argentina for the building sector, and we went through it with the endorsement of the Ministry of Economy and in particular the Secretariat of Energy, which provide support and the engagement we needed to get actual access to some stakeholders that we needed to involve in order to have a comprehensive analysis of the situation. So what we have already in Argentina in terms of building and related to the construction sector in general is that, of course, we have quite inefficient building sectors in terms of their energy performance, and this relates directly with GHG emissions from the construction sector in general. So what we came to realize was that this is probably due to or correlates with the lack of knowledge and public awareness and impacts on energy waste in general, and some very attached prevailing constructive logics and ideas in terms of keep working with very low efficiency materials and not really taking into consideration thermal performance when designing and building. But from the other side, we do see some policies that seem to be going in the right direction in terms of providing an I'm sorry, I'm missing the word for that, kind of motivating the constructive sector to go towards a qualitative growth of the energy efficient construction practices. What we also have is an emerging agenda of regulations that are tending to start ruling how this is done, particularly in some specific bigger cities, but then slowly really expanding to national schemes. What we also have in Argentina is a very particular educational system structure, which as we went through analyzing among different educational systems in other countries, we came to notice that it's kind of tricky, as you could see here in the diagram. We have, of course, a primary or preschool level, but then when it comes to middle level, there are different levels and sub-levels that are somehow connected. For example, the secondary and the higher have these intermediate levels, which could or not be universitary. And then we also have this thing called vocational training that kind of is in between university and non-university. The main characteristics of this middle level education is that it's quite achievable. It means shorter courses, because in Argentina, university curricula, it's very long. It's more than 5 or 6 years in order to get an architecture or an civil engineering degree. So all these middle level are faster. You came out with a degree in a very shorter time. So they tend to be quite popular, and this is why we take them into consideration, because if we need to see consequences faster, of course the attention should be especially put on those intermediate levels. What we also have, and I think this is probably very common, but we understood that it was very important to consider a very broad stakeholders perspective, because change is needed to actually move forward in how we teach and how we build skills in professionals that are going to be linked to the development of buildings. Really requires the intervention. Of course, governmental stakeholders, they were there from the beginning. I've mentioned that we've got the endorsement of the Secretariat of Energy, but we also wanted to get actually involved with the Ministry of Education and other departments, and of course what the Ministry of Environment could have come in and make their own bring on their own perspectives. So the Ministry of Development and Habitat and Public Works, of course, we did not eventually get an effective feedback from all these stakeholders, but they were consulted. Of course, the academy as well. We, as I mentioned before, all these levels were somehow consulted as well and involved in the analysis. And then the other sector that we thought it was important to involve was the non-governmental stakeholders, such as professional associations that actually rule and provide, organize how this very wide spectrum of professions actually develop the work in the territory. They were involved, of course, in the stakeholder assessment. So was the market, because what we noticed is that many of the drivers of efficiency or energy efficiency in construction were actually represented in products, such as different technologies being offered, driving change and willing to gain market and grow. And this is something that, of course, comes from a very different origin. It has nothing to do with education, but it was a relevant stakeholders, because we did notice that as these technologies were more available, more people, more professionals tend to use them and get used to them. And sometimes these marketing strategies involve courses and developing and catching the attention of professionals in terms of let them know how they could better use the technology. So the way they sell these technologies usually involves skill building as well. What we did was what Talat presented before. We made an adaptation of that methodology. We looked to analyze the professional profile, which was not actually one professional profile because of these many different professions and skill sets related somehow to the matter of building. So we analyzed these profiles, and we analyze, of course, from the stakeholders' perspective, considering the whole value chain, how goods and services were provided, and how these provide what we consider the offer, right, of energy efficiency in buildings. We then, of course, conducted surveys, interviews, and of course, we went through the whole 2020 developing this work. So what was supposed to be workshops that were going to be taken in person were then needed to be virtual, but they work really well. And we came out with very big numbers of participants because the theme that was going to be covered is in high demand here. There is there is an awareness that we need to move forward in this direction, and we believe that this would help us building big numbers for the stakeholder workshop that we conducted. Then we did also an analysis on the contents of what the curricula offer for these different levels and various careers among these different levels. And once we gather all that, we develop a supply and demand diagnosis or analyzing in terms willing to dimension the actual gap Then we analyzed that gap, tried to understand which were those barriers and how we could overcome them, and then develop recommendations in order to help develop and expand EEB in Argentina. So what we saw is happening now in the curricula. It is, of course, as I mentioned before, separated by levels. Here we have this intermediate technical professional level in which we assess 56 different programs which that had this particular composition. There were vocational training, most of them, then higher technical education and secondary education. But the key here is that we found very low correlation to some keywords that we used to run this search, in which there were not much correlation to EEB related keywords, especially in the higher technical education, which was the one that was most correlated. But even then, for the postgraduate level, we found a greater proximity. But out of the 182 courses assessed, half of them were those in which we found these keywords appearing consistently. This is, of course, good or better than the immediate level, but not as good as expected. Then for the what we found in, I'm sorry, I'm keep moving this. What we found in the undergraduate level, which is the two main careers that were analyzed, architecture and civil engineering, and some other related engineerings, is that out of 153 different programs in different universities, some of them show some level of correlation, but mainly in the case of architecture and civil engineering, while in the others careers analyzed, the numbers were quite low as well. So in terms of general results, there is a very low frequency of appearance of contexts related to EBB in general in all levels assessed. There is a lack of specific technical content. This is not, it does not seem to be integrated. It's just some add-on specific part of the program. Sometimes there are even elective grades. So it's not comprehensive, and it's not cross-cutting as we would have expected to see it. Of course, we did find higher correlation in postgraduate studies, but postgraduate are not accessible for in Argentina. There is a particularity. I did not know if I mentioned it here in the presentation, but undergraduate education is free. So that means that there is no anyone could have eventually get a degree. However, postgraduate is not free, and it's quite expensive for us. So the fact that we have these contents in offer in a postgraduate study means that it's not necessarily accessible to everyone. And of course, the other strong correlation we found was that this offer is highly concentrated in urban regions only. Then what we came out after analyzing the gap and after understanding how this works was we need to raise awareness in terms of the connection between energy savings and housing comfort and climate change mitigations, because we know that there are policies and big efforts being taken in terms of climate change impact reductions, but they are not necessarily connected with these policies, with energy saving policies in general. We also understood that it was necessary to train officials. We also understand that this awareness raising should be taken earlier on in the first years or the last years of secondary education. We need to train teachers as well to help them integrate context. We need more elective undergraduate subjects that help shape contents towards EBB. This could be through packages, which is a mechanism, because we also analyze mechanisms that were already ongoing. We do not have enough time to make big changes, which will resulting in changes that may take 5 to 10 to 15 years to actually provide a better professional or more skilled professional in these aspects, because some things need to happen before that. So we organize our strategies in the short, mid, and long term. And we also consider the possibility of work on interdisciplinary work skills, because this is something that we noticed that was not necessarily very much developed. And the correlation, of course, in a very broad territory such as Argentina, we have many different climatic zones, and this could also help correlate specific skills for this variability. And then, of course, the access to information to make better choices. And I just need to wrap up because I'm on time, but concluding remarks is that this gap was much more complex than we first expected. It actually has many different dimensions that probably need many different tools and perspectives to be solved. We, of course, also noticed the potential of combining push and pull strategies and play around with regulations and with government, and how we can link this to green finance and green jobs. And of course, the systemic approach seems to be emerging all the time as a tool to deliver this faster and better. And we also see an opportunity for the Argentinian industry to start developing their own products and not just rely on importations all the time. And we also notice that having a more stable and predictable regulatory framework and political context will, of course, help medium and long-term planification. So this is something that we thought it was important to consider in the context of Argentinian mid and long-term policies. Thank you very much. Back to Talat.
Yeah, and thank you, Leila. And now I'll pass the floor on to Thusitha, who will present our Sri Lanka study. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So, as briefed earlier by Talat and also Leila on this overall approach of this project, we at Sri Lanka touch upon the transport sector. I will indicate why we selected that one. So here we have done the similar type of study what Leila presented. Here the first area, the sector is transport. I will quickly show you the outline of my presentation. I'll talk about first introduce the transport sector and importance of energy efficiency in the transport sector, and also the education sector, which produce the actors in the transport sector and their competencies. So therefore, both transport sector and education sector become the very important elements in the energy efficiency in the transport sector. So based on this, we have developed the methodology. I will present the methodology and also the approach where the key stages and also key findings, and finally the recommendation to fill the gaps we identified in the transport sector, the skills and awareness and other competency gaps in actors in the transport sector. Quickly, I will highlight the transport sector in Sri Lanka. Now, when we look at in Sri Lanka, the major mode of transport is road, which comprise around 6 million active vehicle fleet. Our population is 20 million. So then railway, inland water, and air is not very significant. Then we have also bicycles, push cycles, 3 million. Now we look at the mobility. Approximately, we have around 200 billion passenger kilometer. Out of that, 94% coming from road. The balance rail, the inland water and air is very minimal. When you look at the fleet, road transport is around 15 billion fleet ton kilometer, where more than 99% contribution coming from the road. So therefore, road transport is the key in the transport sector. So when you look at it a bit more in detail in the road transport sector, now these are the active vehicle fleet, the growth of active vehicle fleet for the last 20 years. We can see the emergence of these small vehicles, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, cars, which basically contribute to around 83% of the active fleet, the vehicle numbers. The buses basically slightly over 1%, but that contribute to, in fact, around 45% of the mobility, the passenger transport, but number of buses are very minimal. So therefore, when you look at the energy efficiency in the transport sector is now mainly governed by this private sector, private vehicles, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and cars. And we have seen heavy dependence of this sector with the petroleum fuels, which in fact we don't have our own resources, so that all these petroleum fuel are imported. So therefore, we have a impact on economy because of this, the fuel used in the transport sector. So therefore, in fact, with this the increase in two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and the cars, we have seen the deterioration of the energy efficiency of fuel economy in the transport sector as a whole. So therefore, the study on energy efficiency and its impact, as well as the method to improve this situation, become important. Especially one of the key areas is the competencies of the actors in the transport sector who could contribute to the energy efficiency improvement. So therefore, the study look at the transport sector because its importance in the national economy and other like air quality and greenhouse gas. In fact, in terms of greenhouse gases, more than 50% of our energy sector greenhouse gas emission comes from transport sector, and of course around 60% of air quality degradation in urban sector coming from transport. So therefore, we have multiple issues in transport sector. So therefore, this analysis become very important. Now, in the other side, the sector governance, in fact, transport sector is a subject in the national government. So most of the regulations, the planning, everything is, and even the financing is done by the central government. And we look at the transport sector, it's not just the transport ministry or related agencies, where other ministries like or other sectors like energy, environment, development, infrastructure, and of course education and skill development also come as key areas which define the performance of the transport sector as well as energy efficiency. So therefore, this study look at this broader context. One side, the actors in the transport sector or transport-related sectors, and then educational programs which train these actors. So education sector, basically, we have again some kind of a structured formal education, starting from early childhood education, primary school, secondary school. Then we have two branches: technical and vocational education. Then tertiary university education, going into postgraduate and beyond, like consumer professional development programs and so on. So within that, when you look at the transport sector actors, most of the actors are basically trained through this formal education at a higher level. So especially university, tertiary, and technical vocational level. Therefore, this study, when you go for the detailed assessment, we have limited the study to these sectors like tertiary university education as well as technical vocational, the higher level. But of course, in the when you look at the overall education, for competency building for the transport sector actors, we have looked at also the other levels, how those can contribute to this, the competency building, especially looking at the framework of education for sustainable development. It talk about this lifelong learning or life skills as important, the requirement for competency building. So therefore, although we have looked at some formal education program, we have also looked at the other form of education, especially professional education, CPT program, as well as non-formal, informal education, which seems to be a very effective way, presently, in fact, a way of getting the knowledge and also competencies in transport sector. I'll show you some of the results later on, how far these other form of education contribute to the competency building. Methodology we adopted basically is a kind of a stage-wide process. First, we have look at the context setting, looking at the present situation. One side, the transport sector, what the mean of energy efficiency in the transport sector? Who are the key stakeholders, and what way the energy efficiency of transport sector are determined, or how we can improve it? So therefore, we have analyzed the transport sector in the broader context of energy efficiency. It's not just the efficiency of a vehicle. We are looking at the system efficiency. So I will show that one. The way we have identified the how the energy efficiency intervention can be implemented in the transport sector. We have gone for a very broader context. In parallel to that, and we have also analyzed the basis, or rather the basic background of the education sector, especially looking at the context of education for sustainable development. We talk about the competencies of different stakeholders at a different level. It's not just a technical thing. We are looking at the sustainability dimensions. So the skill set required are broader than typical skill sets we target for education systems. So therefore, we first look at both transport sector and education sector to understand how we could what type of competencies we require, as well as what are the type of program we need to build these competencies. Then with this background, we have done the appraisal or assessment of the present transport sector and education sector in Sri Lanka. In the transport sector, basically we look at the institutions which link to the transport sector, not only transport but also energy, development, infrastructure, all these areas. Then what type of subjects assigned for those institutions, and then look at the staff. We have gone for 3 levels of staff: strategic level, tactical level, and operational level, who will contribute to the development of a transport sector, especially looking at the energy efficiency aspect. And also we have looked at different functions of the staff. Some are involved with policy development, some are involved with planning, some are operation, and some are the implementation, and so on. So, or implementation. So those are the ways we have look at the the sector. Similarly, in the education sector, we have looked at different programs, institutions. Here we have gone into mainly science, technology, and engineering courses, including specific areas like architecture, building services, going into science, like the even environment related degrees and so on. There are programs, there are curricula, and also the staff. So in the staff, we have looked at 2 broader contexts of staff. One who involved in the curricular development, and also the setting up of standards, accreditation, and so on at the higher level. Then also we look at the teachers, the lecturers who implement the program, and so on. And most of the cases, what we found is single staff member do both. So therefore, although we have 2 categories, most of the time we have these common activities together. So then we also then look at the type of courses they conduct, which include the transport subject. Most of the time they don't have a specific subject. It's basically environment related or energy related or development related subject, where transport come as a topic, module, and so on. So, but some of the courses, of course, like engineering or technology, they have a specific set of module in a degree program or training courses. But most of the time, it's just some topic within a module. Then finally, we did the gap analysis. One side, looking at the transport sector, we did a stakeholder analysis by looking at their competencies against their job and the job function. So we have looked at, for example, their the level of influence, level of the interest, and then also the expertise to analyze their gaps. And there we also look at the competency framework to identify the gaps also, different level of competencies that is in fact set in the education sector. When you look at the education sector analysis, again we did the stakeholder analysis by looking at the education specialists and also the actors involved in the education, and their that competency framework they use, type of subjects, and then what type of competencies they use in the education program. Then by looking at these 2, the both sides, the transport sector, their present competence levels, education sector, what type of competencies required, then we identify the gaps. With that, we came up with some recommendation for bridging the knowledge gaps, especially highlighting Yeah, okay, thank you. So basically we first with the methodology we identify the transport sector, how we define the energy efficiency. There we come up with this what you call ASI approach, the avoid, reduce, shift, and improve approach used in the transport sector for planning and implementation. And there we identify the skills or the competencies required in these three areas: system efficiency, trip efficiency, and vehicle efficiency, which will define the overall efficiency in the transport sector. Then we have looked at the competency level. There also we have gone into the sustainability framework, the education of sustainability, talk about these three levels of education, the competencies, cognitive competency, what you call the learning to know, the knowledge, methodical competency, the skills, the learning to do, and attitudinal competencies, the behavior, which is learning to be. So finally, all the actors should have different levels of these competencies. We have even gone into a very detailed assessment there. Under cognitive competencies, we had three sub-competency levels. Functional again 3, and attitudinal there are 3. Out of that, we get 9 competencies required for this particular, the actors to inculcate so that they can implement successfully the energy efficiency interventions. So with that we did this study. I will just quickly present the findings. So when you look at the education sector, what we have found there is in the related programs and the modules, in the transport one, most of the energy efficiency area covered are linked to vehicle efficiency, but the travel efficiency and system efficiency aspect of transport are not properly covered. So we see this as a gap. Presently, it only look into more comprehensive only vehicle efficiency. When you look at the emphasis given in these 3 categories of competencies, the cognitive, the knowledge, functional, and the attitudinal competencies, what we found there is again, of course, cognitive, the knowledge, you have some kind of emphasis, but I wouldn't say it's full satisfied, but that at least better than the other. But when you look at the attitudinal and even functional, you see the emphasis given in the education program are not as high as cognitive. So therefore, we see an imbalance there, mean that functional and attitudinal competencies has to be addressed more in developing maybe other training programs in the future. When you look at transport sectors in the gap, what we found is they have good education background, like for example, postgraduate, undergraduate degrees contributing to almost 75%. Diploma again, so their education background is good, but then their professional, the background is not so, because more than around 60% of the staff in total does not have any professional qualification. So that's we see as a gap. More important, when you look at the way they obtain this transport related knowledge, what we found that most of the time it's obtained not through the formal education. It came through, for example, occupational, the means that's beyond the formal education. Then seminars and workshops, the highest, and also non-formal or informal education, the media. Even there are specific training programs. So therefore, the way they have obtained at present the competencies required to tackle the energy efficiency in transport sector are from non-formal and informal education, not through the formal education. So we see a gap there also. We see the opportunity to also train them. So then we look at the very detailed different competencies they have. Again, due to time limitation, I will only talk about the overall efficiency. So there we can see for different operational their functions, policy making and planning, we have quite good competency levels. But when you go for operation and implementation, the competency levels are quite low. So therefore, we see again the competencies related to learning to do and learning to be. Those areas need more comprehension or more attention. And especially when you look at the different sectors, the vehicle efficiency as a good the competency level, but then system efficiency and trip efficiency level, the competencies are not there for them to implement the energy efficiency program. So this is my last slide. Basically, like last 2 slides, the recommendation basically to come up with a more broader context of education program, where formal education has to be presented in an integrated manner from early childhood to final, the university and final professional development program. And also informal and non-formal education has to be brought in as a supportive or complementary tools to build the capacity, and we had to come up with sustainable transport themes and topics, because presently the type of topic introduced in the transport sector, education is not adequate. So with that, with the input from the different experts, education as a transport sector, we have come up with a very detailed thematic areas, subject topics for education in the transport sector, so that this required competencies can be built. So therefore, any course can refer this. In the overall program we are talking about, we have to cover these key core competencies. There are 9 competencies we categorize under 3 groups, and then with that you can come up with thematic areas and subject topics to inculcate these competencies, and thereby what we are proposing is each specific level of education from early childhood to final university, technical and adulthood. We have to come up with some modules based on the education level and selecting the appropriate topics from the list I have presented earlier, and looking at some specific competencies at different education system in line with the core competencies, as well as some learning outcomes in line with the overall program outcome. So that's the final finding in our study, that it presented a framework for different agencies, education agencies, to develop the competency building program. So with that, I will conclude. I take this opportunity to acknowledge Copenhagen Center for Energy Efficiency, as well as UNEP DTU partnership, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, for supporting this study. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thusitha. And now I'll pass on the floor to Keren to present the work that we have done in Kenya.
Thank you very much. This is a presentation from Kenya. I don't know if you can see my screen. I'll switch off my camera so that, yes, there we go.
I can see your screen, Keren. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. That is the outline of my presentation, and I hope to cover that within a very short time. So I'll take you through the energy efficiency sector in Kenya. And we started the efforts on energy efficiency in the early 2000s, just about the turn of the 2000s. And then the whole energy sector is act under the Energy Act of 2019. Prior to the 2019, we had the Energy Act of 2006, and therefore the regulations that we have currently are anchored in that Energy Act of 2006. We have an energy sector regulator, the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, which we simply call EPRA, and they are in charge of the electricity, the renewable energy, and the petroleum downstream sector. So here we just be talking about energy efficiency, which falls under them. We have 2 regulatory instruments, the Energy Management Regulations of 2012, which were basically anchored on the 2006 Energy Act, and now they are under review. They've already been drafted and they are under review, undergoing stakeholder input. We also have the Energy Appliances, Energy Performance and Labeling Regulations, which came into force in 2016. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Last year, the government launched the Kenya National Energy Efficiency and Conservation Strategy. And these targets households which have been left out by and large since the efforts that have been in place since 2000. The households were not captured. Buildings, not much attention had been paid to that. The agricultural and the industry sector, those were well captured, but the transport as well as the power utilities were also not part of that plan. So these have been brought on board, and there are those 5 thematic sectors that have been targeted, and their targets that have been set for them to be achieved in the next 5 years, and that means by 2025. The strategy also recognizes the role of training and capacity building in energy efficiency so as to achieve the targets that have been set. So that's very clear in that national strategy. Let me go more into the energy management regulations, because these are the ones that are applicable in energy efficiency. And the regulations target the industrial, commercial, and institutional facilities that consume more than 180,000 kilowatt hours annually. Now, this is both the electricity and the thermal energy. So there's no clear that this is the proportion that they consume. So they are categorized, these facilities are categorized into small, medium, and high consumers. So the focus for energy efficiency is on the medium, which is the facilities that consume over 180,000 kilowatt hours annually, and the high consumers. So the small consumers are not focused. They are not the targeted by the regulations for now. Now, those are the ones that we talk about designated facilities according to the energy consumption, the low, the medium, and the high consumers. And the medium and the large, they're supposed to develop an energy management policy. You can't get too far in energy efficiency if you do not have a policy. You need to set targets to achieve energy management. They are also supposed to designate an energy officer, just designation who is championing the energy management activities. And then they are also supposed to conduct an energy audit once every 3 years. So far, we have about 1,500 facilities that have conducted the audits. Of course, the reports that have been submitted to the authority are more than the 1,500 because some facilities religiously conduct repeat energy audits. But if you look at the actual facilities that have conducted audits, they are just about 1,500. Of course, there are many, many more. The actual figure we do not have of how many facilities are obliged to carry out energy audits. Now, the other requirement is that they are supposed, once an audit is conducted, they are supposed to develop an energy management implementation plan. You've been given recommendations. How are you going to implement that over the 3 years before the next energy audit cycle, as well as implement the energy conservation measures that have been identified. And before the next energy audit, they're supposed to achieve at least 50% of the recommended energy savings. The other requirement is that they're supposed to monitor the performance of the energy efficiency projects that have been implemented. They also prepare implementation reports and submit them to the authority. So you can see there's quite a bit that needs to be done, as well as keeping records on production and energy consumption data. So that is not submitted, but they're supposed to keep those records. Audits are supposed to be conducted by licensed energy auditors. So the authority also licenses energy auditors. Currently, there are just about 87 energy auditors who are licensed in Kenya to take care of the whole energy efficiency sector. Now, in terms of licensing, the energy auditors are supposed to meet certain minimum academic qualifications. In the older days, we used to have what was referred to as the higher national diploma, and that is the bare minimum that an licensed applicant can possess, or they could have a bachelor's degree or postgraduate degree. So the lowest of these is the higher national diploma. Then they're supposed to have passed an energy management certification exam or have a postgraduate diploma or master's degree in energy management. So this is either or. You have the certification already, or you have the postgraduate diploma or the MSc degree in energy management. So it's very categorical that this has to be in the area of energy management. The third provision is that the license applicant also need to have conducted at least 5 energy audits. So when one meets these 3 requirements, that's when they are considered for licensing as energy auditors. So the 87 who are already existing have gone through this. So the other piece of registration that I talked about is the Appliances Energy Performance and Labeling Regulations of 2016. And this is basically maps that their appliances are tested by accredited labs for energy performance. So what you're basically checking is some minimum requirements on the energy performance. Once they pass, they are registered with EPRA and that list is available to the public. If you visited their website, you'd find the register of the appliances. Then once they go to the market, the appliances are affixed with the appropriate Energy Star label. I guess we are familiar with the Energy Star labels, and therefore the consumer can make an informed decision when they are buying whatever appliance it is. They know how much they are bound to spend on that. The appliances that are covered under these regulations include fridges, three-phase induction motors, non-ducted air conditioners, lamps, and basically these fluorescent lamps, and ballasts for the fluorescent lamps. Now, I would say the refrigerators energy labeling is the one that has been very effective. Motors are a little bit difficult to capture because, like industries, if they are importing any motors, they come as a component of a bigger system. So that makes it very difficult, but we still have that. But it's been very effective. The labeling has been very effective. The program has been very effective in terms of refrigerators. The fluorescent lamps, because of the coming of the LEDs, we don't have a lot of fluorescent lamps coming into the market. So that looks like something that has been overtaken by the market, what's available in the market. The energy auditors, I will focus more on the energy auditors in this, the professionals that we have in Kenya, because as
Keren,
I
you
said,
have to go a bit faster.
Okay, thank you. So as I said, the regulations only require the facilities to designate an energy officer. So there are no formal requirements of what the energy officers require to have. So this focuses on the energy auditors and the skills that they have and the knowledge. Mainly, they've attended short courses. They've also attended postgraduate degree courses and international energy management certification programs, mainly offered by the Association of Energy Engineers. So a lot of them have done the CEM, Certified Energy Manager courses, Certified Energy Auditor courses, and Certified Measurement and Verification professional courses. Now, while we carried out this work, we basically wanted to find out what's the demand for the energy efficiency services that the professionals are offering. So we reviewed the energy audits that have been submitted to the authority. As I said, that is one of the requirements, that when the energy audits are conducted, the report needs to be submitted to the authority. So we went through that to find out what are the weaknesses, what systems are they coming across in industries and in the commercial facilities and institutions. Then we singled out on a few of those facilities and we actually paid some field visits to go and talk to the energy officers because they're not captured under the audit reports, as well as find additional information from the facilities themselves. We interviewed the energy auditors as well as the universities. We wanted to find out what are the programs that they are offering, the local universities. And basically, because the requirement is the postgraduate programs, we focused on the postgraduate programs, not undergraduate programs or the diploma programs. And then finally, there are partners who have some interest in energy efficiency. So we spoke to some government agencies and non-governmental agencies who are involved in this. So what exactly do we need? Does an energy auditor require? What are the knowledge and skills that they require? Under energy management, they need to have some fundamental knowledge on energy management. They need to understand the tariffs, particularly the electricity tariffs, because for the thermal energy, those are just pump prices, so there's nothing much to understand. They need to understand data collection and analysis. Once you've collected the data, then you need to analyze the data and establishing energy performance indices. In as far as technical knowledge goes, they need to understand the electrical power system analysis, thermodynamics and heat transfer, combined heat and power systems optimization, commissioning principles, operation and maintenance practices, new and existing technologies that come to the market, and measurement and verification techniques and protocols. They also need to have some analysis skills, so basically statistical, because you are dealing with historical data, which you need to analyze and establish some trends. They also need whole system analysis and some problem-solving techniques. So in terms of financial skills, once you have all that data, you need to convince the facility that, yes, this is a project worth going into. So they need to have some knowledge in economics, life cycle costing, financial decision-making processes, financing options, cost control and budgeting, and risk management. Then they also need to be aware of the standards and regulations that are in place nationally, and the counties. In Kenya, we have the counties, as well as the global best practices. And they need to communicate their findings to the facility and to the outside world. So they need to have those skills, as well as performance contracting, judgment and decision making, as well as report writing. So where are these skills required? What is the demand? Where is the demand? We have a lot of motors and drives, refrigeration systems, we have pumping systems, we have fans, lighting systems, like in every situation. We have compressed air systems, HVAC systems, and boilers and steam. So these are the systems and processes that we found are very common in Kenya. Now, when we spoke to the facilities, and they told us there are some challenges that they encounter when it comes to implementation of the energy conservation measures. The first that they highlighted is unrealistic implementation costs. So what are the auditors doing, and what is this that they do not know? They also said that they sometimes provide inadequate information on the ECMs, and therefore they are not able to move forward with that. And the technologies sometimes are not that are recommended are not available locally, and therefore they get stuck. They don't implement whatever has been recommended, as well as lack of skilled personnel. I told you in Kenya we only have 87 auditors as of now, so those are not enough to do the audits as well as help with the implementation of the ECMs. So what are the skills then be asked? What are the skills that the energy auditors currently have? They understand very well the energy use. They're able to establish the energy baseline, which is very important for you to know where you're coming from, and therefore where are you going once you implement. Data collection and analysis, they are very good at that. They understand the energy pricing and tariffs, as well as they are able to identify the appropriate energy performance indices, and they are able to identify and evaluate the potential energy efficiency opportunities. So where are the gaps? Much as they're able to evaluate independent systems within independent components within systems, the whole system analysis approach is weak, as well as the measurement planning. You'll find people taking measurements, but they do not know where to use that data. So we need to improve on that, as well as financial appraisal of these projects so that they become attractive to the facilities. M&V processes, they are also not very strong at that, and energy accounting, as well as the financing, the EE projects financing methods, what's useful to these facilities. Risk analysis, they don't do a lot of that, and a lot of them are not aware of the energy management standards, which would be very useful in terms of leveraging the field so that all the reports become very uniform. So how do we bridge these gaps? The short-term courses that we would propose is we need to have trainings of these energy auditors on energy systems optimization, energy measurement techniques and monitoring, energy accounting and metering, financial analysis, which you said they are not very strong at, the energy efficiency project financing, what are the mechanisms, what are the resources, what are the alternatives that these facilities can use, risk management, they've not gone into that at all, energy economics in terms of financing the projects, as well as performance contracting. That's very important because Kenya is moving into ESCOs, and therefore performance contracting will become very useful in future. The introduction to measurement and verification is key as a short course because a lot of them have not done CMVP. Energy management regulations and standards, I think I've just said a lot of them we've realized they're not aware of what standards are applicable when it comes to energy auditing, as well as they need to improve their energy audit reporting skills. Now, in the long term, because the postgraduate courses are the ones that are recognized, even the energy management regulations that are under review, the focus is more on the postgraduate courses. So we are looking at what topics would be useful if they are included in those postgraduate programs. So these are what we found the weaknesses are, and therefore we are proposing that those courses should include the energy management and auditing as a basic, instrumentation and control for energy systems, energy measurement techniques, energy modeling and optimization, that is very key, energy use and resource management, the material and energy balance, solar thermal energy. That's very key, particularly for Kenya, because we have water heating, solar water heating. So that would really be very important for us. Energy and water efficiency. Energy efficiency in buildings, none of those courses. I think it's only one course that we found was looking at the efficiency of buildings as well as measurement and verification. The energy management and transport, I think I mentioned transport is one of the targets as far as the strategy is concerned, and would be happy to have the codes and the standards. In terms of the economic analysis, the energy economics and planning, energy, climate change and carbon trade, we don't have that as yet. Financial and project management, as well as project economics and evaluation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Keren, for the presentation. Now I'd like to open the floor for questions. We already have, and I'll also request all the panelists to put their web camera on. So I already have one question for Thusitha. So basically, Thusitha, the question being asked is, does government recognize the informal form of training? In this, I mean, if I learn mechanical skills from a skilled mechanic, is there a way my skills can be accessed and be issued with a certificate of proficiency?
Yes, we have a scheme set by the government for technical education. There are 7 levels. The 7th level is basically for the graduate level, and starting from craft level. There are multiple entry points. So therefore, if you have some background knowledge which have come through informal or non-formal education, there's entry kind of a exam where you can show your competencies and then enter into the education stream, the technical education at a midpoint. But only thing is there's no the evaluation scheme providing certificate for existing knowledge. You have to follow a course. Only thing is we can have a entry point at the midway. So therefore in a way it's recognized, but not the fully so there are some gaps. Thank you.
Thank you. So there is also a question for me, basically asking how we selected these 3 countries and for assessing the capacity gaps, and was there any reason for it? Okay, so there were reasons also, and we also looked at convenience. So basically, like when we started this project, we were already doing some work in Argentina, and with the Ministry of, with the Secretariat of Energy in Argentina. So we did a liaison with them, and we started working with Argentina. And then the idea was to look at 3 different continents. So then we looked at Africa, and then we were also developing this energy efficiency policy for Africa, for Kenya. So we thought it would be good to liaison with the Ministry of Energy there and work in Kenya on this topic again. And with Sri Lanka, again, we were engaging in Sri Lanka in another context on an ICAT project. So we liaisoned with Chamber of Commerce in Sri Lanka, and then that's how we started working with Thusitha there. So basically, it was like trying to distribute the work among 3 continents, distributing the work among the sectors, and also looking at our own convenience if we can work in the countries within those governments. Is there any other question? So I think we might have time for only these 2 questions now. Then I'll pass the floor on to Susanne to close the event.
Thank you, Talat, and thank you very much to all the speakers and the participants in this session. I think we've heard some very interesting examples from Argentina, Sri Lanka, and Kenya on the challenges that have been identified in terms of the skills gap in the energy efficiency sector. Certainly, we heard that it was a multidimensional gap. We also heard examples of how you need to sort of address it thematically, so you make education plans that are also geared towards a specific sector. And also, lastly, from Kenya, we heard about, the energy auditors and the licensing and the various educational needs that were identified there for the industry sector. And I thought that our colleague from Kenya pointed out a very interesting point at the end where it was stated that Kenya is moving into ESCO and performance contracts around ESCOs, and that even further education was needed in order to help, identify and structure performance contracts. So I'm sure there's still lots to do, but identifying the issue and starting to address the gaps is a huge step forward. So we hope that we from UNEP DTU Partnership can, of course, assist you and others in that. But with those words, I would like to thank everyone for their contribution and hope that we can discuss further. Thank you very much.